The universe had fundamental constants: gravity, entropy, the speed of light, and then there was Patterson's inability to work with idiots. Everyone back! Commander Victoria Hayes stumbled away from the 50-ton crate of medical supplies as the gravity beam flickered and died for the third time in as many minutes. The massive container dropped 6 inches before the secondary emitters caught it, sending a metallic shriek through the cargo bay that made everyone's teeth ache. Patty stood at the edge of the loading dock, tea mug in hand, watching his crewmates scatter like roaches when the lights came on. The Meridian had been hauling freight between Earth and the outer colonies for 8 months now, and in that time he'd seen some spectacular displays of incompetence, but this was approaching new heights. "Generators out of fuel again," announced Rick Sullivan, the ship's engineer, his face pale as he stared at the readout on his tablet. "That's it. We can't lift it. Can't we just refuel?" Hayes asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Sullivan shook his head. "Takes 6 hours for the antimatter injectors to recalibrate. We don't have that kind of time before the next supply run." Patty took a sip of his tea. The crate contained vaccines for an outbreak on Ganymede Station. 20,000 colonists waiting for medicine that was currently sitting 30 feet from where it needed to be. "The fates have forbidden this delivery," intoned Zaltith, the ship's Chromaxy cultural liaison. The 7-foot-tall alien's multiple eye stalks swiveled mournfully toward the crate. "The sacred mathematics of the ancients decree that mass cannot be moved without the blessings of the gravity spirits." Patty closed his eyes and counted to 5. He'd learned that counting to 10 just gave him more time to consider violence. "We should abandon the supplies," Hayes said, her voice tight. "Report back to Earth that the delivery was impossible given our technical limitations." 20,000 people, Patty said quietly. Hayes turned to look at him. "I know, Patterson, but what do you expect us to do? We don't have the equipment to. Give me 5 minutes." Patty set his mug down on a nearby crate with the kind of care usually reserved for defusing bombs. He walked past his crewmates, ignoring their confused looks, and headed for the maintenance storage bay. The Meridian was a hauler-class vessel, which meant it was basically a flying warehouse with engines strapped to it. Somewhere in the mess of spare parts and replacement components, he found what he was looking for. A 12-foot titanium support strut, probably meant for emergency hull repairs. Patty hefted it, testing the weight and balance. Solid construction, no visible stress fractures. He carried it back to the cargo bay, where his crew was still standing around the crate like mourners at a funeral. "Patterson, what are you doing?" Hayes asked. Patty didn't answer. He was too busy scanning the ground near the loading dock. The Meridian had landed on a rocky plateau outside the distribution center, and scattered among the dirt and dust were chunks of granite that had been blasted free during the landing pad's construction. He found what he needed, a boulder about 3 feet across, worn smooth on one side. It took some doing to roll it into position near the edge of the loading dock, but Patty had learned long ago that stubbornness could substitute for most physical advantages. "Oh, ancestors, preserve us," Zaltith whispered. "He performs the ancient rituals." "He's lost his mind," Sullivan muttered. Patty wedged one end of the titanium strut under the edge of the crate, then positioned the boulder beneath the strut about 3 feet from the crate's edge. 9 feet of leverage on the long end. "Basic physics. Force times distance equals force times distance," he said to no one in particular. "The universe doesn't give a damn about your gravity generators." He pressed down on the long end of the lever. Nothing happened. Patty adjusted his stance, planted his feet, and tried again. The crate shifted, rising an inch off the deck plating. "It's working," Hayes gasped. "How is that possible?" "Triangles, you morons," Patty grunted, pressing harder. The crate rose another few inches. He could feel the leverage doing exactly what several thousand years of human engineering knowledge said it should do. The 50-ton crate was effectively weightless on the short end of his lever. He walked forward, pushing the long end down as he went. The crate tilted up, balancing on the edge of the loading dock. One more push and the crate slid into the cargo bay with a thunderous boom that rattled every loose bolt in the ship. Patty released the lever and walked back to retrieve his tea. Still warm. Good. The crew stared at him in silence. "What did you just do?" Zaltith said slowly. All 7 eye stalks focused on Patty with an intensity that would have been unnerving if Patty hadn't already been completely done with this conversation. "Moved a crate," Patty said, "but the gravity generators don't matter." Patty took a long drink of tea. "That's the point. Hayes approached the lever setup, crouching down to examine the boulder and the titanium strut. This is incredible. How did you know this would work? Because I went to elementary school. Patty set his mug down again and began pulling the strut free. Archimedes figured this out before humans had electricity. Give me a long enough lever and a place to stand, and I can move the world. It's not magic. It's not forbidden by the fates. It's just mechanical advantage. Sullivan was frantically typing notes into his tablet. The force calculation, the ratio of the distances from the fulcrum, Patterson. Do you realize what you've just demonstrated? This could revolutionize how we handle cargo on ships without functional gravity systems. It's a lever, Rick. We've had them for 3,000 years. But no one thought to use them in space. Sullivan's eyes were wide with excitement. We've been so dependent on our technology that we forgot the simple solutions. Zaltith stepped forward, his imposing frame somehow managing to look sheepish. On my homeworld, we have ancient texts that speak of the great machines of the before times. Massive stones moved by our ancestors using methods lost to history. We assumed they possessed powers we had forgotten. They had rocks and sticks, Patty said, and apparently more sense than their descendants. Hayes was still staring at the crate in the cargo bay. I need to report this. Command is going to want a full analysis of your technique. My technique is called physics. Patty picked up his tea mug and started walking toward the crew quarters. It's been peer-reviewed. Wait, Hayes called after him. We need to document this properly. The way you calculated the leverage ratios, the positioning of the fulcrum. Patty stopped and turned around. His crewmates were all looking at him with a mixture of awe and confusion that made his head hurt. Force 1 times distance 1 equals force 2 times distance 2. The crate weighs 50 tons. I can push it with about 0.1 tons of force. So I need the distance on my side to be 500 times longer than the distance on the crate's side. I gave myself a 3-to-1 ratio because I'm not an idiot and I wanted a safety margin. That's it. That's the whole thing. Sullivan was recording everything. But where did you learn to apply these principles so effectively? Shop class, Patty said. 10th grade. Remarkable, Zaltith said. On Cromex, such knowledge is guarded by the engineering clans, passed down through generations of ritual training. Yeah, well. On Earth, we put it in textbooks and make teenagers learn it. Patty turned to leave again. Patterson, Hayes's voice had taken on her command tone. I'm going to need you to show the rest of the crew how to replicate this if we encounter similar situations. It's a lever, Victoria. One of the 6 simple machines they teach you about in middle school. Along with the wheel, the pulley, the inclined plane, the wedge, and the screw. Patty could feel a headache building behind his eyes. I showed you how it works. You watched me do it. There's nothing to replicate. You just need a rigid bar and a fulcrum. Hayes pulled out her data pad and started making notes. I'm officially recording this incident in the ship's log as the defiance of weight. It'll serve as a reminder that human ingenuity can overcome even the most challenging obstacles when we don't. Call it that, Patty said. Call it what? The defiance of weight. It's not defying anything. It's using weight. That's how levers work. You use the weight of the object against itself through mechanical advantage. But Hayes was already typing, a slight smile on her face. No, I think it's perfect. The day Patty Patterson defied the fundamental forces of the universe with nothing but a stick and a rock. Patty felt something inside him snap. He looked up at the ceiling of the cargo bay, at the cold metal and circuitry that separated them from the vacuum of space, and screamed. It's just a fulcrum. Why did you give me a crew that doesn't understand triangles? His voice echoed through the cargo bay, bouncing off the walls and coming back to mock him. Somewhere in the engineering section, an alarm started beeping, probably triggered by his outburst reaching dangerous decibel levels. The crew stood in stunned silence. Zaltith was the first to speak. What are triangles? Patty looked at the alien. All 7 eye stalks were focused on him with genuine curiosity. The Cromaxi had faster-than-light travel, quantum computers, and medical technology that could regrow limbs. But apparently basic geometry was a mystery. Triangles, Patty said, his voice flat with exhausted patience, are shapes with 3 sides. They're fundamental to engineering because they're structurally stable. The lever works because you create a triangle of forces. The fulcrum at one point, the load at another, and the effort at the third. The rigid bar connecting them doesn't bend or collapse because triangles distribute force evenly. Zaltith's eye stalks swiveled to look at each other, a gesture Patty had learned meant deep thought. We have shapes with three sides on Chromex. We call them strength angles. They are considered sacred geometry only to be used in religious architecture. Of course they are, Patty muttered. Sullivan was still taking notes. This is fascinating. The implications for cargo handling alone could save millions of credits in fuel costs. And if we apply these principles to other areas of ship operation. Rick, Patty interrupted. I need you to understand something. This isn't new. This isn't innovative. This is literally ancient technology. We've been using levers since before we invented writing. The pyramids were built using levers and ramps, the Great Wall of China, the Roman aqueducts. Every major construction project in human history used these principles. But in space, on Earth, on the bottom of the ocean, it doesn't matter. Physics is physics. The math doesn't change just because you're not standing on a planet. Hayes finished her log entry and looked up. Regardless of how you feel about it, Patterson, what you did today was impressive. The board of directors is going to want to know why we haven't been using these techniques all along. Because everyone got lazy, Patty said. We built gravity generators and tractor beams and forgot how to think. We stopped teaching the basics because we assumed we'd always have the advanced stuff. And now we're paying the price for that arrogance. He started walking toward the crew quarters again, but Hayes stepped into his path. I need you to run a training session, she said. Tomorrow morning, show everyone on board how to use simple machines for cargo handling. Patty stared at her. You want me to teach grown adults how to use a lever? Yes, grown adults who operate a starship capable of faster-than-light travel. Yes, adults who presumably passed some kind of basic education requirement to get their positions. Patterson, I don't care if it seems elementary to you. Clearly, it's not elementary to the rest of us. Tomorrow morning, 0900 hours, main cargo bay, bring teaching materials. Patty looked at his tea mug. It was empty. That seemed appropriate somehow. Fine, he said. The next morning, Patty stood in the cargo bay with a box of spare parts and a growing sense of doom. The entire crew had assembled, 23 people and one Chromaxi, all staring at him expectantly. He'd spent the night preparing materials, printing out diagrams, and questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. At 0300 hours, he'd seriously considered just walking out the airlock without a suit. At least that would be quick. All right, he began, setting up his first demonstration. This is a lever. It's a rigid bar that pivots on a fulcrum. The point where you apply force is called the effort. The point where the work is done is called the load. The magic happens because of distance ratios. He'd brought a smaller crate, only 5 tons, and a shorter titanium strut. A smaller rock served as his fulcrum. The closer the fulcrum is to the load, the less force you need to move it, Patty continued. But you have to move the effort end farther. It's a trade-off. You don't get something for nothing. You're exchanging distance for force. He demonstrated, pushing down on the long end and watching the crate rise smoothly. Questions so far? Every hand went up. Patty closed his eyes and counted to 5 again. Yes, Sullivan. Why does the position of the fulcrum matter so much? Because it determines the mechanical advantage. The ratio of distances from the fulcrum to the effort and load points tells you how much force multiplication you get. If the effort arm is 10 times longer than the load arm, you can lift 10 times your own strength. More hands. Yes, Zaltith. Is this the sacred knowledge of the Earth clans? No, it's 8th grade physics. Next question. Johnson. Ensign Emily Johnson lowered her hand. Could we use this technique for repairs on the hull instead of waiting for the gravity generators to recharge? Patty felt a small spark of hope. Yes, exactly. That's the whole point. You don't need powered equipment for everything. Sometimes the simple solution is the best solution. He spent the next hour demonstrating different lever configurations. First-class levers with the fulcrum in the middle, like a seesaw. Second-class levers with the load in the middle, like a wheelbarrow. Third-class levers with the effort in the middle, like a fishing rod. Each type has advantages, Patty explained, moving a crate with a second-class lever set up. First class gives you the most mechanical advantage. Second class is more stable. Third class increases speed and range of motion instead of force. Hayes was taking detailed notes. This is going to change everything about how we operate. We've been stuck in a mindset that said we needed technology for every problem. Technology is fine, Patty said. I like technology. But technology fails. Generators run out of fuel, computers crash. When that happens, you need to understand the basics. He moved on to pulleys, showing how they could redirect force and create mechanical advantage through rope and wheels. Then inclined planes, demonstrating how rolling a crate up a ramp was easier than lifting it straight up. Same principle as the lever, he said, pushing a crate up a makeshift ramp. You're trading distance for force. The ramp is longer than the direct path, but you need less strength to move the load. By hour 3, the crew was actually starting to get it. Sullivan had set up his own lever system and was moving crates around the cargo bay with obvious delight. Johnson and 2 other ensigns were experimenting with different pulley configurations. Zaltith approached Patty with a thoughtful expression. These simple machines, they are all based on the same principle, are they not? The exchange of one resource for another. Yeah, Patty said, surprised. That's exactly right. You never get something for nothing. You either trade distance for force or force for distance, or you redirect the force in a more useful direction. But the total energy stays the same. On Chromax, we have a saying, Zaltith said. The universe always balances its books. I never understood what it meant until now. That's actually pretty deep, Patty admitted. The Chromaxy's eye stalks swiveled in what Patty had learned was pleasure. Your species may lack the advanced biotech of the Chromaxy or the computational powers of the Andorian collective, but you have something else. You understand the fundamental principles. You build from the ground up. We had to, Patty said. We didn't have anyone to give us shortcuts. We had to figure everything out the hard way. Perhaps that is humanity's strength, Zaltith mused. While other species reached for the stars with gifts from their predecessors, you crawled up from the mud using nothing but determination and cleverness. Patty had never thought about it that way. Or maybe we're just too stubborn to quit when things get hard. Hayes called for attention from across the cargo bay. All right, everyone. I want each team to practice these techniques for the next week. Patterson will be available for consultation, and I'm adding basic simple machines to the mandatory training curriculum for all new crew members. A chorus of groans met this announcement. I don't care if you think it's beneath you, Hayes continued. What Patterson showed us yesterday probably saved this mission and might save lives in the future. We're going to learn this material and we're going to learn it well. Dismissed. The crew dispersed, chattering among themselves about levers and pulleys and mechanical advantage. Patty started gathering his teaching materials, ready to retreat to his quarters and pretend the rest of the universe didn't exist for a while. Patterson, Hayes said, walking over. Thank you, for what? For not giving up on us, she smiled. I know it must be frustrating working with people who don't understand what seems obvious to you, but you didn't just complain. You taught us, and that takes patience. I have the patience of a caffeinated goldfish, Patty said. I just didn't want those people on Ganymede to die because we were too dumb to move a box. Still, Hayes put a hand on his shoulder, what you did matters. You reminded all of us that we can't just rely on our technology. We need to understand how things actually work. Patty shrugged. Just don't make a big deal out of it. Too late, Hayes said cheerfully. I already sent my report to Earth Command. They're calling you the father of low-tech space solutions. Of course they are. Patty picked up his box of materials. I'm going to my quarters. Wake me if something needs moving. He made it halfway to the door before Sullivan intercepted him. Patterson, I've been thinking, the engineer said, practically vibrating with excitement. If we apply these principles to the landing gear systems, we could reduce our reliance on hydraulics. And the airlocks, we could add manual override systems using simple machines as backups. That's actually a good idea, Patty admitted. I want to redesign half the ship, Sullivan continued. Add redundant systems based on simple machines, make us less dependent on power systems that can fail. Now you're getting it, Sullivan grinned. This is going to be fun. I haven't had a good engineering challenge in months. Patty left him there, already sketching designs on his tablet. The man had the look of someone who just discovered a new religion, which was concerning, but at least showed he was learning. Back in his quarters, Patty collapsed onto his bunk and stared at the ceiling. His datapad beeped, a message from Earth Command. Mr. Patterson, your innovative application of classical mechanics in zero-gravity cargo handling has been noted with commendation. We would like to schedule a consultation to discuss implementation of similar techniques across the fleet. Patty deleted the message and rolled over to face the wall. The next few days settled into a strange routine. Crew members would stop him in the corridors to ask questions about mechanical advantage or to show him their latest simple machine designs. Zaltith had become obsessed with wedges and spent hours carving titanium into different shapes to test their splitting efficiency. Johnson had rigged up a compound pulley system in the gym that let her lift 3 times her body weight. The Meridian reached Ganymede Station on time, and the medical supplies were unloaded using a combination of gravity generators and lever systems. The station administrator was confused but grateful. "Your crew seems very enthusiastic about basic physics," she observed, watching Sullivan explain fulcrum positioning to a group of station workers. "They recently had a religious experience," Patty said. "It'll pass," but it didn't pass. Word spread through the colonial network about the ship that had delivered critical supplies using nothing but metal bars and rocks. Other vessels started requesting training materials. Earth Command issued a directive that all ships carry basic simple machine components for emergency use. Patty's inbox filled with messages from engineers, cargo specialists, and academic researchers. Everyone wanted to know more about the defiance of weight, which had apparently become legendary. He ignored most of them. 3 weeks later, the Meridian received an emergency distress call from a mining colony on Europa. A cave-in had trapped 60 workers behind tons of ice and rock. The colony's heavy equipment had been damaged in the same seismic event that caused the collapse. "They need help moving rubble," Hayes said at the emergency briefing. "We're the closest ship with experience in manual heavy lifting." Every eye in the room turned to Patty. He sighed. "How much rubble are we talking about?" "Approximately 300 tons of ice and rock. And what do we have to work with?" "Whatever we can find on site. The colony has basic mining equipment, hand tools, support structures." Patty thought about it. 300 tons. They'd need multiple lever systems working in coordination. Probably some inclined planes to redirect the debris flow, maybe pulleys to lift the smaller chunks. "We'll need a team," he said. "Sullivan, Johnson, and Zaltith. And anyone else who actually paid attention during training." Hayes nodded. "You'll have full authority on site. Whatever you need, it's yours." The Meridian reached Europa in 18 hours. The mining colony was a cluster of pressurized domes on the moon's icy surface, connected by transit tubes. The collapse had occurred in the main excavation tunnel, where workers had been extracting water ice for the colony's life support systems. Colony Director Frank Wilson met them at the airlock. "Thank God you're here. We've been trying to clear the tunnel, but every time we move one chunk, 2 more shift into place. We're afraid the whole thing will come down if we're not careful." Patty suited up and followed Wilson to the collapse site. The tunnel entrance was completely blocked by a chaotic mess of ice boulders and rock fragments, some as large as cars. Behind that wall, 60 people were running out of air. "Show me what you've tried," Patty said. Wilson gestured to a group of miners standing near a damaged excavator. "We used that to pull at the debris, but the arm broke. We tried chipping away at it by hand, but the ice is too thick and we're not making progress fast enough." Patty studied the collapse. The ice had fractured along natural fault lines, creating irregular chunks that had wedged together. Trying to pull them out would just lock them tighter. They needed to lift and redirect. "Sullivan," Patty called over the radio, "I need you to find me the longest, strongest beams you can, at least 20 feet long, and rocks, big ones." "On it," Sullivan responded. Patty turned to Wilson. "I need your miners to clear a workspace here about 30 feet in diameter, and I need someone who knows the tunnel layout. We're going to have to be strategic about which pieces we move first." Over the next 2 hours, they set up a series of lever systems around the collapse site. Long titanium beams scavenged from structural supports served as lever arms. Carefully positioned boulders acted as fulcrums. Patty calculated the angles and distances for each setup, making sure the force vectors would lift the debris up and away from the tunnel entrance rather than deeper into it. "This is insane," one of the miners muttered. "We're trying to save people with sticks and rocks. Would you prefer to keep failing with your broken excavator?" Patty asked. The miner shut up. Zaltith had taken charge of positioning the fulcrums, his multiple eye stalks giving him excellent spatial awareness. Johnson coordinated the lifting teams, making sure everyone applied force at the exact same moment. "Ready on lever 1, she called. "Lever 2 ready," Sullivan responded. "Lever 3 ready," another crew member confirmed. Patty checked the positions one more time. The 3 levers were positioned to lift the 3 largest ice chunks simultaneously, creating a gap in the debris field that would allow them to access the smaller pieces behind. On my mark, Patty said. 20 people pressed down on the long ends of the levers. The massive ice chunks rose slowly, groaning against the friction. Hold it, Patty shouted. Wilson, get your team in there. Clear the smaller stuff while we've got these pieces lifted. The miners rushed forward with hand tools, breaking up and removing the fragments that had been trapped beneath the larger chunks. It was hard, dangerous work in bulky pressure suits, but they moved with desperate efficiency. Debris clear, Wilson called after 5 minutes. Lower the levers, Patty ordered. Slowly, the ice chunks settled back down into new positions, creating a wider gap in the blockage. They repeated the process 12 times over the next 4 hours. Lift, clear, reposition. Each cycle opened the tunnel a bit more. Patty's calculations had to account for the shifting weight distribution as they removed debris, adjusting fulcrum positions and lever lengths to maintain mechanical advantage. Sullivan appeared at his side during one of the breaks. This is incredible. We're moving more material per hour than the excavator was managing before it broke. Simple machines don't break down, Patty said. That's why they're useful. Finally, after 6 hours of continuous work, they broke through. A narrow gap appeared in the debris field, and pressurized air rushed out from the tunnel beyond. We've got people, Wilson shouted. They're alive. The rescue took another 3 hours as they carefully extracted the trapped miners one by one through the narrow opening. All 60 survivors emerged exhausted and dehydrated, but unharmed. The colony's medical team rushed them to the hospital dome while Patty's crew collapsed in the transit tube, too tired to celebrate properly. You saved them, Wilson said, gripping Patty's hand through his pressure suit. With nothing but metal bars and rocks, I've never seen anything like it. You've seen it before, Patty said. You just forgot. Humans have been doing this kind of thing for thousands of years. Wilson shook his head in amazement. The mining guild is going to want a full report. This technique could revolutionize emergency response operations across the colonies. Great, Patty said flatly. Tell them to read a physics textbook. Back on the Meridian, the crew gathered in the mess hall for a late dinner. Everyone was exhausted but energized by the successful rescue. Hayes stood up to make a toast. To Patty Patterson, who proved once again that human ingenuity doesn't require advanced technology. Just knowledge, determination, and the willingness to think. And tea, Sullivan added. And tea, Hayes agreed, raising her cup. Everyone drank except Patty, who was staring at his empty plate and wondering how his life had come to this. Speech, someone called out. No, Patty said. Come on, Patterson, Johnson urged. You saved 60 lives today. Give us something inspirational. Patty looked around the table at his crewmates. They were all smiling at him with genuine affection and respect. It was deeply uncomfortable. Fine, he said, standing up. Here's my speech. What we did today wasn't special. It wasn't innovative. It wasn't defying the laws of physics or challenging the fates or whatever poetic nonsense you want to call it. We just used basic mechanical principles that have been understood for millennia. The fact that this seems impressive to you is a testament to how much we've forgotten in our rush to develop fancier technology. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Humans got to space the hard way, Patty continued. We didn't have help from advanced alien civilizations. We didn't find ancient technology that gave us shortcuts. We started with rocks and sticks, and we built our way up, learning every principle, every equation, every hard lesson through trial and error. That knowledge, that understanding of how the universe actually works, is our greatest strength. Not our computers, not our gravity generators. Our ability to look at a problem and find a solution using nothing but physics and determination. He sat back down. The crew was silent for a moment, then burst into applause. That was actually pretty good, Hayes said. I'm going to bed, Patty announced, standing up again. Wake me if there's an apocalypse, and only if it's a serious one. He made it to his quarters without further interruption and collapsed onto his bunk. His data pad was blinking with new messages, but he ignored it. Whatever the universe wanted from him, it could wait until tomorrow. In the morning, Patty woke to find his door chime beeping insistently. He checked the time. 0600 hours. Whoever was bothering him had better have a good reason. He opened the door to find Zaltith standing in the corridor, holding what appeared to be a model of the Meridian constructed entirely from titanium bars connected in triangular patterns. I have achieved enlightenment, the Chromexy announced. Patty stared at the model. What is that? The sacred geometry made manifest. I have redesigned the Meridian using only strength angles, triangles as you call them. This structure would be lighter, stronger, and require less material than our current design. Patty took the model and examined it. The design was actually quite good. Zaltith had created a truss structure that distributed force evenly throughout the frame, maximizing strength while minimizing mass. "This is a space frame," Patty said. "It's a real engineering technique. They use it for bridges and building frames." "I invented it," Zaltith said proudly. "You reinvented it, but honestly, this is solid work. You should show it to Sullivan." Zaltith's eye stalks quivered with joy. "You approve of my sacred geometry?" "I approve of your engineering," Patty corrected. "The math is sound." "That's what matters." The Chromexy took the model back reverently. "I must meditate on this success." "Thank you, Teacher Patterson." "Don't call me that." But Zaltith was already walking away, cradling the model like a holy relic. Patty closed his door and leaned against it, wondering how long it would take for this to blow over. A week, a month, forever, his datapad beeped. Another message from Earth Command. "Mr. Patterson, in recognition of your contributions to colonial rescue operations and innovative application of classical mechanics, you have been awarded the Civilian Medal of Excellence. A ceremony will be held." Patty deleted the message. The Meridian continued its route through the outer colonies, and everywhere they went, people wanted to know about the man who moved mountains with triangles. Patty had become something between a celebrity and a folk hero, which was his personal nightmare. At Titan Station, the harbor master insisted on demonstrating his new lever-based cargo system. At Callisto Outpost, they'd renamed their main plaza Patterson Square in honor of his rescue work on Europa. At Enceladus Colony, a group of school children presented him with drawings of stick figures moving giant boulders. "They think you're magic," their teacher explained. "I'm a guy who paid attention in school," Patty said. "That's not magic." But try as he might, Patty couldn't seem to convince people that what he'd done wasn't extraordinary. The more he insisted it was basic knowledge, the more impressed they became with his humility. Hayes found him hiding in the cargo bay one evening, sitting on a crate and drinking tea in blessed silence. "Running away from your fans?" she asked. "I'm not running. I'm tactically hiding." Hayes sat down next to him. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just another cynical freight handler. Someone putting in their time until retirement." "That's exactly what I'm doing," Patty said. "No," Hayes said. "You're a teacher, whether you want to be or not. You see problems that other people miss, and you solve them in ways that seem obvious in hindsight, but that no one else thought of. That's a gift. It's called basic education. It's more than that." Hayes looked at him seriously. "You care. You pretend to be annoyed and frustrated with everyone, but when lives were on the line on Europa, you didn't hesitate. You worked for 6 hours straight to save people you'd never met. That's not just education, that's character." Patty was quiet for a moment. "I hate it when you're right." "I know," Hayes smiled. "Look, I know you didn't ask for this. I know you'd rather just do your job quietly and be left alone. But you've started something important. You've reminded an entire generation of spacefarers that we can't just rely on our technology. We need to understand the fundamentals. So what do you want me to do about it?" "Keep teaching," Hayes said. "Not because it makes you famous or gets you medals. Because people need to know this stuff. Because the next time a gravity generator fails or a rescue operation goes wrong, someone might remember what you taught them and save lives because of it." Patty drank his tea and thought about that. He'd never wanted to be a teacher. He'd certainly never wanted to be famous. But Hayes had a point. If his grumbling and complaining could save even one life, maybe it was worth the annoyance. "Fine," he said, "but I'm not doing any more ceremonies or interviews or public appearances." "Deal," Hayes said. "Just keep being yourself. That seems to be working pretty well." The Meridian completed its route and returned to Earth 6 months after the incident with the medical supplies. During that time, Patty had trained 17 crews on simple machines, consulted on 12 emergency rescue operations, and received 43 awards that he'd immediately donated to charity. Earth Command wanted to promote him to Chief Technical Consultant for the Colonial Fleet. He declined. A major university wanted to give him an honorary doctorate in engineering. He declined that too. 3 different publishers wanted to write his biography. He told them all exactly where they could stick their offers. But he did agree to one thing: a training program for new recruits, teaching them the fundamentals of simple machines and basic physics before they ever set foot on a ship. The course would be mandatory, and it would be taught by people who actually knew what they were talking about. No more crews that don't understand triangles, he told Hayes. On his last day aboard the Meridian before transferring to his new position at the training facility, the crew threw him a goodbye party. There was cake, terrible speeches, and a heartfelt thank you from Zaltith that involved 14 minutes of Chromaxy poetry about the sacred nature of knowledge. Patty endured it with as much grace as he could manage, which wasn't much. Sullivan presented him with a gift, a small titanium lever, perfectly balanced, mounted on a wooden base. "So you'll remember us," Sullivan said. "I have nightmares that ensure I'll never forget you people," Patty said, but he accepted the gift with something that might have been a smile. Johnson gave him a hug that nearly cracked his ribs. Hayes shook his hand and thanked him for everything. Even the crew members he'd barely spoken to lined up to say goodbye and tell him how much they'd learned. And Zaltith, in a gesture that would have seemed ridiculous if it weren't so sincere, got down on all 7 knee joints. "You have given my people a great gift," the Chromaxy said. "You have shown us that the sacred geometry of the ancients was not lost divine knowledge but discoverable truth. We can learn what was forgotten. We can understand what was mysterious. That is a revelation that will echo through generations." Patty helped the alien stand back up. "Just teach your people math, Zaltith, real math, not mystical geometry. The universe doesn't care about your rituals. It cares about whether you can do the calculations." "I will," Zaltith promised. "I am writing a text for Chromaxy students, translated from Earth educational materials. Introduction to simple machines and their sacred applications." "Drop the sacred part," Patty said. "Just make it accurate." Patty gathered his belongings, which weren't much, just clothes and his collection of tea socks, and prepared to disembark. The training facility on Earth wasn't going to be glamorous work. It would be long hours of explaining basic concepts to people who should have learned them years ago. There would be frustration, confusion, and probably a lot of screaming at the ceiling. In other words, exactly what he'd been doing for the past 6 months. But maybe he could make a difference. Maybe he could create a generation of spacefarers who understood that fancy technology was great, but fundamental knowledge was essential. Maybe they'd remember their training when a gravity generator failed, or a rescue operation required creative thinking. Maybe they'd save lives because someone had bothered to teach them about triangles. The shuttle ride to Earth was quiet and uneventful, which was exactly how Patty liked things. He watched the Meridian shrink in the distance through the viewport, thinking about everything that had happened since that day in the cargo bay. A 50-ton crate, a titanium pipe, and a rock. That's all it had taken to start a revolution in how the colonial fleet thought about problem-solving. Not because he'd invented something new, but because he'd remembered something old. His datapad beeped, one last message from Hayes. "Patterson, I know you hate sentiment, so I'll keep this brief. Thank you for reminding all of us that the best technology in the universe is still the human brain. Don't let the bureaucrats grind you down." Patty smiled despite himself and typed a reply. "Hayes, I know you love giving orders, so here's one for you. Keep the crew practicing their simple machines. Make them do the drills every week. And if anyone starts calling what we did magic or destiny or any of that nonsense, hit them with a physics textbook. Patterson out." He sent the message and turned off his datapad. The Earth grew larger in the viewport, a blue marble covered in clouds and continents. Somewhere down there, a classroom was waiting for him. Students who needed to learn that the universe operated on discoverable principles, not mysterious forces. That human ingenuity wasn't about defying nature, but understanding it well enough to work with it. Patty settled back in his seat and closed his eyes. The universe had fundamental constants: gravity, entropy, the speed of light. And somewhere between those immutable laws and the infinite complexity of existence, there was room for a man with a lever to move the world, or at least a 50-ton crate of medical supplies.